Welcome into One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports takes, commentary, analysis, and of course, predictions. Today we are continuing our college football prediction series with today's team, the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's get into it. Before we start today's video, I have to ask you guys, if you enjoy this college football content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 200 subscribers before the start of college football season, but I need your guys' help to do it. Without further ado, let's get started. So last season was a bit of a mixed bag for Georgia. On one hand, it seemed like a down year, going 11-2, and then 11-3, and exiting in the first round of the playoff, losing as the higher seed to Notre Dame. But on the other hand, even in a quote unquote down year, you end up as SEC champions, and you win the SEC championship with playing half the game with your backup quarterback. So even in a, like I said, down year for Georgia and Kirby Smart, it was still wildly successful, and you were the best team in the SEC, winning the SEC title. So not really a down year, if you ask me. You did lose a decent amount from last year's team, though, as you come in last in the SEC in returning production at 46%. That's 96th in the nation. You lose 4 starters along your offensive line. You lose Trevor Etienne, one of your primary running backs. You lose your top 2 receivers, Dominique Lovett and Arian Smith. And, of course, you lose Carson Beck. Then defensively, you lose some of your best players, including Malachi Starks, first-round pick at safety, Jalen Walker, star at linebacker, Dan Jackson, safety, Shamal Munden, linebacker, Mykel Williams, first-round pick at defensive end. So the defense does lose a lot of the guys who were considered the leaders, higher-end players on the roster. Returning-wise, on offense, you bring back Gunnar Stockton, who's going to replace Carson Beck. We saw him a little bit in the SEC title game in the playoff. We'll talk more about him later. Then you bring back Nate Frazier, who as a true freshman definitely showed glimpses of his potential. You bring back Colby Young and Dylan Bell at receiver. Oscar Delp and Lucky Lawson form one of the best tight end duos in the SEC. They come back as well. And then you return Christian Miller, Jordan Hall, and Xavier McLeod on the defensive line, more on the interior, really. So you have what should be a pretty good front 3. The edge is where it has more questions. And then C.J. Allen at linebackers, one of your better players. And then Dalen Everett and K.J. Bolden are the best players returning in the secondary. Georgia went out and made some pretty big additions to the team as well. Wide receivers was a big issue last year. Had the most drops in the SEC. Was really holding the team back in a lot of ways. You add Zachariah Branch, speedster from USC. Noah Thomas, who was, I believe, Texas A&M's leading receiver. And you added Micah Bell from Vanderbilt. Also from the transfer portal, you added edge Elo Madozi from Army. You added a defensive lineman from Miami, an interior offensive lineman from UCF, and 3 safety transfers as well. And then you brought in the number 2 recruiting class in the country, featuring 4 5-star recruits, Elijah Griffin at defensive line, Isaiah Gibson at edge rusher, Juan Gibson at offensive tackle, and Zayden Walker at linebacker. Of course, Georgia is going to be littered with 5 stars across the board. They're consistently a top 3 recruiting team. So there's also a ton of names that we might not know now who could break out, who they just kind of been stockpiling behind some of the higher draft pick guys they've had already. So if we had to pin down the specific strengths and weaknesses, I would say the secondary, with K.J. Bolden, I think, going to be one of the best players in the SEC on defense, and Dalen Everett being really good. I think that'll be a strength. And then the upgraded weapons. Of course, bringing back Dylan Bell, Colby Young, Oscar Delp, and Lucky Lawson is great. But then adding a guy like Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch is going to make this Georgia team a lot more explosive than last season, in my opinion, with guys who, can really catch the ball and do things in space. And then the weaknesses, the O-line, when you lose 4 starters, that's going to be a big question. Of course, you have the talent there to replace him, but offensive line, we know it's about cohesiveness, and it's more of an unknown. Maybe it could be even above average, but right now I would have to say it looks like a weakness on paper. And then the pass rush, I just don't see, like, when you lose Mykel Williams, right now it's unclear who's going to step up and be a top-level edge rusher for Georgia. Getting into the game prediction, the first 2 are clearly wins. Like, there's not much to say about Marshall or Austin Peay in terms of if they can beat Georgia. That's clearly a win. Then you start SEC play in week 3, going on the road to Tennessee, who at this point, Joey Aguilar's had a couple of games under his belt as the new Tennessee quarterback. But with all Tennessee's losing, their run game shouldn't be as good with Dylan Sampson gone. I don't expect Joey Aguilar to be as good as Nico Iamaleava. Even defensively, which was one of their strengths last year, it's not going to be quite as good. So overall, I expect Tennessee to take a step back. I think Georgia can go on the road to Neyland and get the win, and then get their first bye week of the year. Off the bye, you play at home against Alabama, a team that has proven to give Kirby Smart troubles. At first, seemed like maybe a Nick Saban issue. Then you beat him in the national championship. Maybe you got over it, but it has continued. And even last year, Georgia was unable to beat Alabama. I also think this Alabama team has a lot that can challenge Georgia in terms of a great offensive line, great receivers, and I think a defense that has the talent to slow down Georgia as well. And it just seems to be a tricky team for Georgia. I think Alabama gets you in week 4, and then you bounce back and beat Kentucky, who's actually played you close a lot under. Was it Mark Stoops? Why am I thinking Bob Stoops? Yeah, Mark Stoops. And last year actually took you down to the wire, but at home, I expect you to beat them. Then going on the road to Jordan Hare could be tricky. Depending on how good of quarterback play Auburn gets, they could be really dangerous next season. With Jackson Arnold, of course. They have a really good defensive line, like Alabama. They have great weapons, Cam Coleman, Eric Singleton. And Hugh Freeze, this is kind of a make or break year. He needs to get some big wins. So I do think this is a challenging game on the road, especially a tough place to play. But I do think Georgia wins. Just in the past few matchups, Georgia's been pretty dominant against Auburn. There was one year where it was pretty close, but for the most part, the defense really limits Auburn's scheme. And I expect a lot of that too. I don't think it'll be a high scoring game or a blowout or anything, but I think Georgia can slow down the Auburn attack and run the ball decent enough. Gunnar Stockton manage the game and just not make the mistake. And I'm going to go with Georgia to beat Auburn. And then at home, I think you also beat an Ole Miss team that beat you last year with Jackson Dart. This team loses a lot, though. They don't have the same receivers, different quarterback. The defense loses a ton of talent, guys like Walter Nolan, especially being one of their best defensive linemen. That's all gone from what was supposed to be one of the best Ole Miss teams in a long time. I still think Ole Miss will be very good, but Georgia looking for kind of a revenge game from last year and at home, and now clearly with the talent gap between them and Ole Miss, I think you're going to win that game before your final bye week of the year. Off the bye week, another tricky game with a Florida team that has the talent to be really good, but based on how brutal their schedule is, they could be desperate at this point in the year. DJ Lagway probably gives Florida the quarterback edge, and Florida matches up well in the trenches, probably having a better O-line, maybe having a better D-line, and a run game that should be at least as good as Georgia's. But and also, you're not going to have home field advantage, right? You're playing in a neutral stadium. But Georgia, I think, clear coaching edge. I'm not huge on Billy Napier, so I like the Kirby Smart versus Billy Napier dynamic. I also think Georgia has more depth, and at this point in the year, that does start to matter. I don't think Florida, like I said, they match up in the trenches. I don't think they're going to dominate in the trenches, which I think a lot of Florida's wins this year are going to come where teams they can really control the line of scrimmage. I think this is more of just a wash, and maybe even still favors Georgia a little bit. And I think Georgia wins this game. I expect a lot of games this year, including this one, for Georgia's defense to step up and Gunnar Stockton to make enough plays. I don't think he's going to be the star quarterback elevating the team, but I think he can manage it enough, make some plays with his feet, make enough passes, and you have playmakers who can, just make a play, like Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas can make a play. They don't have to go for 100-something yards every week, but you can do enough offensively to win these games. And then Mississippi State, I think, is probably the worst team in the SEC. I think Georgia gets that one pretty easily. Up next, you face a Texas team at home that I think is maybe the best team in the SEC, but kind of like Georgia with Alabama, it seems like Texas might have a bit of a Georgia problem. Losing in the regular season, a game a lot of people thought they were going to win. I did not. And losing in the SEC championship game, again, a game a lot of people thought Texas would win. Once again, I expected Georgia to win. And I think there is something there. There was something that was significantly thrown off for Texas each time they versed Georgia's defense. And though I think they're going to be good, Arch Manning's going to be really good. The O-line, though, won't be as good. The receivers probably not as good. The defense should be elite. So like I said, another low-scoring game. But Georgia at home, and I don't know when this game will be played, probably a night game. But either way, it's going to be a rocking environment. And with what I saw last year, I just like Georgia more in this matchup. And then I like them to beat Charlotte. And then in a sneaky game, I'm going to take Georgia. Everyone's going to take Georgia. But Georgia Tech, after what they did last year, and I think are going to be improved outside of Alabama and Texas, I think you could argue Georgia Tech. It's actually a neutral site. I don't think it's a road game. But you could argue Georgia Tech is the third toughest game on Georgia's schedule. I am going with Georgia for the win because they still have such a talent edge. They recruit at such a higher level than Georgia Tech, but that is a difficult game. You shouldn't underestimate the Yellow Jackets. That gives us a final record of 11-1 for the Georgia Bulldogs, almost assuredly placing them in the SEC title. And depending on how that game goes, they'll be in the college football playoff. The question is, how high? Well, that's all I have for today's video. For more college football content, you can check out the videos I've already made on the channel. And of course, we have more coming. If you enjoy, leave a like and subscribe. Until next time.